It was a quiet Saturday evening, and James and I were relaxing at home, sipping wine and listening to music. Our 6-month marriage seemed like a dream, and I couldn't have been happier. James was attentive, loving, and made me feel special at every moment. As James went to the kitchen to fetch another bottle of wine, I picked up his phone to change the song that was playing. That's when I saw a message notification from my friend Alice. I found it odd, as it wasn't common for them to talk. The message preview said, quote, "I don't want to hurt Laura in any way." My heart raced. Without a second thought, I clicked on the notification to read the entire conversation, but to my surprise, there was nothing there. The conversation had been deleted. My mind started to spin, trying to understand what was happening. When James returned to the living room, I confronted him immediately. "What's going on between you and Alice?" I asked, trying to control my trembling voice. He looked at me, confused, and denied any involvement.
"I don't know what you're talking about, love. There's nothing between me and Alice."
But I didn't believe him. Anger took over me, and in a fit of rage, I threw his phone against the wall, shattering it into pieces. "Don't lie to me!" I screamed, tears streaming down my face. James tried to calm me down, saying,
"Laura, please, calm down. Ask Alice there was no conversation. You're imagining things."
Exhausted from the wine and the outburst, I decided to send a message to Alice, demanding an explanation. However, before seeing her response, I fell asleep on the couch, overcome by emotional fatigue. The next morning, I woke up with the sun streaming through the window and a terrible headache. I immediately remembered the previous night and grabbed my phone with trembling hands. There it was, a message from Alice. To my shock and horror, Alice had sent me the entire conversation between her and James, without any shame. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment to hurt me. Each message was a stab to my heart. Intimate photos, promises of passionate sex, declarations of love. Everything was there, laid bare before my eyes. I felt my world crumble. My husband and my best friend, the two people I trusted the most, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. The pain of betrayal was overwhelming, and I didn't know how I would manage to move forward. Sitting on the couch with my phone in my hands, I wept copiously. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions: anger, sadness, disappointment, disbelief. How could they do this to me? How could I have been so blind? Now I needed to make a decision. Confront James again, demand the truth, and decide the future of our marriage. But at that moment, I felt lost and completely shattered. The betrayal of those I loved most had left me in pieces, and I had no idea how to put those shards back together. I was utterly devastated. The pain of James and Alice's betrayal was so intense that I could barely breathe. It felt as if my heart had been ripped from my chest and trampled mercilessly. I never imagined I could suffer so much for love. As the pain consumed me, an overwhelming rage grew within me. How could they do this to me? How could they betray my trust and my love in such a cruel way? I wanted to scream, break things, make them feel the same pain I was feeling. I picked up my phone, thinking of calling one of my friends for comfort and support, but I hesitated. A wave of shame hit me, and I felt pathetic. How could I have been so naive to believe that I was worthy of love and loyalty? How could I have given myself so completely to James, believing that our love was true and unshakable? I remembered the conversations I had with my friends when James and I decided to get married, just 8 months after we started dating. They questioned if it wasn't too soon, if we weren't being hasty. But I, blinded by love and passion, didn't listen. I was convinced that James was the man of my life and that our love would overcome any obstacle. Now here I am, curled up in bed, crying like a naive and stupid little girl. I feel humiliated for believing in fairy tales, for giving myself so completely to someone who didn't deserve my trust. Shame burns in my chest, mixing with pain and anger. I look at the wedding ring on my finger, that symbol of love and commitment that now seems like a bad joke. How could I have been so blind? How did I not see the signs, the lies, the betrayal unfolding right before my eyes? I wish I could go back in time, have listened to my friends when they expressed their concerns. I wish I had been more cautious, had protected my heart. But now it's too late. I'm here, shattered and humiliated, trying to pick up the pieces of my broken heart. Shame prevents me from asking for help, from sharing my pain with those who could offer comfort. I feel alone, lost, and completely destroyed. How will I manage to move forward after this betrayal? How will I find the strength to face James and Alice, to demand answers and make decisions? I don't know. All I know is that the pain is unbearable and the shame is suffocating. I need to find a way to deal with these feelings, to pick myself up and move on. But right now, all I can do is curl up in bed and cry until I have no more tears to shed. 3 days have passed since I discovered James and Alice's betrayal. 3 days in which I barely left the bed, lost in a whirlwind of emotions. I ate very little, took only 1 shower, and spent most of the time crying and dwelling on the pain that consumed me. I thought about leaving the house, running away from the reality that suffocated me. But then, in a moment of clarity, I realized that it wasn't me who should leave. It was James who had to go. He was the one who had betrayed our trust, our love. He was the one who should face the consequences of his actions. I gathered all the courage I had left and called him to talk. When he entered the room, his face was pale and his eyes were tired. He tried to approach me, but I stopped him with a gesture. "James, I want you to leave the house for a few days," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I need time to think, to decide what I want to do with our marriage."
Laura, my love, please, let's talk. It's not what you think. I swear there's nothing between me and Alice.
I laughed bitterly. How could he keep denying it, even with all the evidence before us? The messages, the photos, the promises of passionate sex. It was all there, laid bare, and yet he had the audacity to try to convince me that it was nothing. I shouted, anger bubbling inside me. "James, enough with the lies. I saw everything, read every disgusting message you exchanged. How can you say it's nothing? You betrayed me, James. You and Alice stabbed me in the back in the worst possible way." He tried to explain himself, saying it was just a moment of weakness, that it meant nothing, that it was me he truly loved. But every word that came out of his mouth sounded false and empty. I couldn't believe anything he said anymore. "Enough, James. I don't want to hear your flimsy excuses anymore. I want you to pack your things and leave the house now. I need space to think, to decide if there's anything left to save in this marriage." He tried to argue, to beg for another chance, but I was adamant. The pain and anger spoke louder than any empty promise he could make. Finally, he gave in and started packing his bags, crestfallen and defeated. As I watched him leave, I felt a mix of relief and fear. Relief for finally taking a stand, for not allowing him to keep deceiving me. Fear for the uncertain future that awaited me, for the difficult decisions I would have to make. But I knew I needed to go through this, to face the pain and betrayal head on. Only then could I find the strength to move forward, with or without James in my life. Sitting on the bed, staring at the door through which James had left, I knew that the road ahead would be long and painful. But I was determined to walk it, one step at a time, because I had no other choice. Staying in bed crying and torturing myself forever was not an option. After spending days immersed in my own pain, I finally mustered the courage to call my friend, Bianca. As soon as she answered, I broke down in tears, telling her everything that had happened. Bianca listened patiently, offering words of comfort and support. It wasn't long before she was knocking on my door, loaded with bags of food, wine, and all the affection I so desperately needed. Bianca had always been an amazing friend, with a special gift for balancing silence and embraces at the right moments. For the next 2 days, Bianca never left my side. She held me as I cried, made me laugh with her jokes about James's lack of character, and helped me order several bottles of wine for delivery. But most importantly, she didn't utter a single word of judgment. Bianca was simply there for me, supporting me unconditionally. Gradually, I began to feel grateful for having a friend like her in my life. I realized that I might have underestimated my friendships, that my fear of judgment from those around me was unfounded. Bianca showed me that I wasn't alone, that there were people willing to love and support me, regardless of my mistakes or choices. After 2 days of care and comfort, I felt more composed. That's when Bianca asked me an unexpected question, with a discreet smile hinting at the corner of her mouth.
Laura, do you mind if I invite Gabriel and Mariana over? I think it would be good to have more people around you, to distract you a bit.
I was silent for a moment, pondering the idea. Mariana was Bianca's girlfriend, a sweet and fun girl whom I adored. Gabriel, on the other hand, Mariana's brother and Bianca's brother-in-law, was a different story. I knew he had been in love with me for 2 years, ever since we met at Bianca's birthday party. At that time, we had a brief relationship, but I was emotionally unavailable, healing from an old love, and our story didn't move forward. However, during all this time, he never hid his feelings. Later, I met James and fell in love with him. I had always been faithful to James and kept my relationship with Gabriel strictly friendly since then. Now, faced with Bianca's proposal, I found myself reflecting on Gabriel. He was, without a doubt, the most handsome man I had ever seen in my life. Tall, with soft, dark curls and piercing green eyes, Gabriel had a smile capable of melting any heart. But beyond his physical beauty, he was also intelligent, funny, and kind. He had always treated me with respect and affection, even knowing I was committed. I felt flattered to be the object of desire of a man like Gabriel. After all the pain and humiliation I had gone through with James, it was comforting to know that someone truly valued and desired me. I decided there was no harm in having him around, especially now that I was single. "Sure, Bianca, you can invite them. I think it will be good to have more company," I replied, trying to hide the slight tremor in my voice. A few hours later, the doorbell rang, and there they were. Mariana with her contagious smile, and Gabriel, more handsome than ever. When our eyes met, I felt a shiver run through my body. He enveloped me in a tight hug, whispering in my ear how sorry he was for everything I was going through. At that moment, embraced in Gabriel's safety with Bianca and Mariana around me, I felt that maybe, just maybe, I could overcome all the pain and start anew. That night, after a dinner filled with wine and laughter with Bianca, Mariana, and Gabriel, I felt something different in the air. A more intense gaze from Gabriel, a lingering touch on my hand. And then when Bianca and Mariana said their goodbyes, leaving us alone, it happened. Gabriel kissed me with a passion I had never experienced before. His lips were soft and urgent against mine, his hands exploring my body with reverence and desire. At that moment, I surrendered myself completely to him, leaving behind all the pain and betrayal I had suffered. We made love with an overwhelming intensity, our bodies fitting perfectly together, as if they had been made for each other. Every touch, every kiss, every movement was an affirmation of the love Gabriel felt for me. A love that was reliable, silent, respectful, and full of adoration. As we lost ourselves in each other, I felt as if I was removing James from my body, from my soul. Each caress from Gabriel erased a bit of the pain, replacing it with pleasure and affection. For the first time in a long time, I felt valued, desired, and above all, loved. I fell asleep in Gabriel's arms, grateful to have him in my life, to know that there was someone who loved me unconditionally, regardless of my mistakes and flaws. The next morning, I woke up to the delicious smell of fresh coffee and scrambled eggs. Gabriel had prepared lunch for us, a simple gesture but full of meaning. We ate together, talking about everything and nothing at the same time, enjoying each other's company. But eventually, it was time for Gabriel to leave. He kissed me softly, promising to always be by my side, no matter what happened. And then, for the first time in days, I found myself alone with my thoughts and feelings. Sitting on the couch, facing the silence of the apartment, I realized that I could no longer postpone the inevitable. It was time to look inside myself, to face my choices and my uncertain future. I thought about all the plans I had made with James, all the dreams we shared. A happy marriage, children, a house with a white picket fence, and a dog. It all seemed so distant now, so out of reach. But then I remembered Bianca's and Gabriel's words.
You are strong, Laura. You will overcome this and find the happiness you deserve.
I will always be here for you, no matter what happens.
I realized that, despite all the pain and uncertainty, I was not alone. I had friends who loved me, who believed in me, and I had myself, a strong woman, capable of facing any challenge that life presented to her. Looking out the window at the blue sky and the bright sun, I decided it was time to start over, to reinvent myself, to find new dreams and goals. It would be a long and sometimes frightening path, but I was ready to walk it. With a sigh, I got up from the couch and started tidying up the mess of the last few days. It was time to put my life in order, to take the first step towards my new future. A future without James, but full of possibilities and hope. I knew it wouldn't be easy, that there would be days when the pain and longing would be almost unbearable. But I also knew that I was capable of overcoming all of this. After all, I was Laura, a strong, brave, and determined woman. And with the support of my friends and the strength within me, I could face anything that life had in store for me. Only 4 days had passed since Gabriel and I had been together. 4 days in which I tried to focus on rebuilding my life, on healing the wounds left by James's betrayal. Gabriel had been a constant support, visiting me and encouraging me to move forward. Then, one afternoon, my phone vibrated with an unexpected message. It was James, saying he had gotten a new phone and wanted to meet me to talk. My heart tightened, like a shriveled raisin, but still beating strongly in my chest. In my chest, no longer throughout my entire body. Reluctantly, I decided I needed to hear what he had to say. Maybe only then I could have closure and move on for good. I arranged to meet him at a nearby cafe, trying to relearn how to breathe so as not to succumb to the anger, sadness, or love that, despite everything, I still felt. When I arrived, James was already there, haggard and with deep, dark circles under his eyes. He apologized, saying he never intended to hurt me and that he had lost his way. I listened to his words in silence, trying to process each one of them.
I know, Laura. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But please, let me stay at home, at least until I can get myself together. I promise I won't bother you, that I'll respect your space. I have nowhere to go, no family in the city, and no friends besides yours. Please.
I was silent for a moment, weighing my options. I knew the right thing to do would be to send him away, to move on with my life. But a part of me, the one that still cared about him, couldn't leave him helpless. All right, James, you can stay at home, but only until you can get yourself together. And I want to make it clear that this doesn't change anything between us. We have nothing anymore. We're no longer a couple, I said, emphasizing each word. He nodded, looking relieved and grateful at the same time.
Thank you, Laura. I promise I won't disappoint you again. I'll use this time to reflect on my mistakes and try to become a better person.
We left the cafe together, walking in silence back home. When we arrived, I showed James the guest room, making it clear that this was where he would stay. He accepted without question, seeming simply grateful to have a place to stay. In the days that followed, I tried to maintain a safe distance from James. I focused on my work, my friends, on rebuilding my life. Gabriel continued to be a constant support, visiting me and reminding me that I deserved to be happy. But sometimes, at night, I could hear James crying in his room. Part of me wanted to go to him, to comfort him, to tell him that everything would be okay. But I knew I couldn't do that. I knew I needed to stay firm in my decision to move forward. In the weeks that followed, James began to show a new side of himself. Despite living in the guest room, he made a point of being present in the house, trying to get closer to me in subtle ways. At first, it was small gestures. He would prepare breakfast, leaving it ready before I woke up. He bought my favorite flowers and placed them in a vase in the living room. He offered to do the grocery shopping or take care of the dishes after meals. Initially, I maintained my distant stance, determined to move forward with the divorce. But gradually, James's persistence began to shake my convictions. He was really making an effort to show that he had changed, that he wanted to be a better man. One day, I came home after a stressful day at work and found a hot bath prepared, with relaxing salts and aromatic candles. James had cooked my favorite dish and opened a bottle of wine. That gesture touched me deeply, making me question if I was making the right decision. On the following nights, James proposed that we have dinner together, like in the old days. Reluctantly, I accepted. During these meals, he opened up to me, talking about his fears, his insecurities, and his genuine remorse. He begged me for a second chance, swearing that he would do everything to rebuild our relationship. Slowly, I felt my defenses falling. With each smile, each gentle touch, each sincere word, James was winning back my heart. I began to question if divorce was really what I wanted, if there wasn't a possibility of forgiveness and a fresh start. Gabriel, noticing my hesitation, tried to warn me. He reminded me of all the pain James had caused me, of how much I had suffered. But in my heart, I knew I needed to make my own decisions, however difficult they might be. One night, after a particularly emotional dinner, James asked me to dance with him in the living room, as we used to do when we were newlyweds. In each other's arms, swaying to the soft music, I felt my heart fill with a long-forgotten emotion. Looking into James's eyes, I saw the man I had fallen in love with, the man who had sworn to love and respect me for a lifetime. At that moment, I made my decision. I would give James a second chance, an opportunity to prove that he had changed, that we could rebuild our marriage on more solid foundations. I knew it would be a long and difficult path, requiring a lot from both of us. Determined to give James a second chance, I began to make an effort to rebuild our relationship. However, I soon realized that the lack of trust in my husband was a bigger obstacle than I had imagined. Every time James left the house, I found myself questioning where he was, who he was talking to, if he was being honest with me. I checked his phone when he wasn't around, looking for any sign of betrayal. I knew this behavior wasn't healthy, but I couldn't help it. James, noticing my distrust, tried to reassure me. He would call me during the day to tell me where he was, introduce me to new coworkers, and make a point of including me in all aspects of his life. But still, the doubt persisted, eroding our relationship from the inside. Our plans to get pregnant, which had seemed so certain before the betrayal, were now on hold. I couldn't imagine bringing a child into the world with a man I didn't fully trust. How could I build a family on such fragile foundations? That's when I decided to pursue an old dream, getting a master's degree. Before meeting James, I had planned to continue my studies, but married life had put those plans on the back burner. Now, with our relationship in crisis, I felt I needed something to motivate me, to give me a purpose beyond my marriage. When I told James about my decision, he supported me unconditionally. He said he would do everything to help me so that I could pursue my dreams. That gesture touched me deeply, making me question if I wasn't being unfair by doubting him so much. In the following months, I immersed myself in my studies. I spent sleepless nights reading articles, writing essays, preparing presentations. The idea of entering a master's program became my refuge, a goal where I could focus on and open up my mind to something other than the problems in my marriage. James, in turn, did everything to support me. He cooked, took care of the house, gave me space when I needed to study. Gradually, I began to see the man I had fallen in love with, the dedicated and loving man who had always been there for me. But still, the distrust persisted. It was like an ever-present shadow, tainting even the happiest moments. I knew I needed to work on this, that I needed to find a way to truly forgive and move forward. One day, after the news that I had been accepted into the master's program, I came home to find James waiting for me with a special dinner. He had prepared my favorite dish and bought my preferred wine. When I sat at the table, he held my hand and looked into my eyes.
Laura, I know it's still difficult for you to trust me. I know I hurt you in a way that may never be fully repaired. But I want you to know that I'm here, that I'm committed to our marriage, to our love. I will spend every day of my life trying to regain your trust, your respect. Because you, my love, are worth every effort.
At that moment, looking into James's eyes, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. I knew there would still be challenges ahead, that the distrust wouldn't disappear overnight. But for the first time in a long while, I felt hope that we could overcome this, that perhaps our relationship was bigger than this, that this was just a bad phase. The future was still uncertain, but I was ready to face it, with my dreams as a guide and, who knows, James by my side. As the master's program progressed, I felt increasingly fulfilled. The classes were stimulating, the debates heated, and the knowledge acquired enriching. I was happy to have resumed this dream, and at the same time, my relationship with James seemed to be improving every day. However, there was an unexpected element in this equation: Professor Rodrigo. He was a large man with broad shoulders, brown hair beginning to turn gray, and very dark almond-shaped eyes. He had been a prodigy student. He was almost my age, already had a postdoctorate, and was fluent in 4 languages. He was extremely charming, with a low and firm voice and large hands that gestured in precise movements as he explained things. From the first day of class, I noticed his lingering glances in my direction, his charming smiles, and his subtle compliments about my intelligence and dedication. At first, I didn't give it much importance. After all, it was common for professors to recognize the efforts of their students. But as the weeks passed, Rodrigo's gestures became bolder, more direct. He began to call me to talk after class, suggesting books I should read, sharing ideas for my research. Our debates would last for hours, and I found myself increasingly intellectually involved with this cultured and captivating man. One day, after a particularly intense class, Rodrigo invited me for coffee. Hesitantly, I accepted. Sitting in a cafe near the university, we talked about philosophy, literature, art. Rodrigo had a fascinating opinion on everything, and I found myself completely absorbed by his brilliant mind. But then, in a moment of silence, Rodrigo's knee touched mine under the table. For a millisecond that lingered far too long, I waited for it to be a bump, for him to quickly move his knee away. But he didn't. That touch under the table, apparently involuntary, apparently innocent, turned out to be loaded with meaning. I felt my heart race, a mixture of excitement and, I confess, a tiny, almost non-existent pinch of guilt taking over me. I gasped. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension from the danger, the attraction, rise through my legs, belly, spine, neck, dominating my mind. But I didn't pull away. We continued talking until it started to get late, and I needed to leave. As I walked home, my mind was in turmoil. I loved James. I was committed to rebuilding our marriage. But I couldn't deny the attraction I felt for Rodrigo, the intellectual and emotional connection we shared. In the following weeks, I tried to keep my distance from Rodrigo, focusing only on academic matters. But he always seemed to find a way to get closer, to make me feel special and desired. One day, after a particularly intense meeting with Rodrigo to discuss my research, I came home to find James waiting for me with a romantic dinner. He had prepared my favorite dish, bought flowers, and a box of my favorite chocolates. I even found it a bit exaggerated. He seemed to be courting me like a romance novel character, as if he had never touched me. Or as if he had touched me so much to the point of breaking me and was desperately trying to mend me with fermented grapes, carbs, and high-quality cocoa. Looking at the man who had promised to love and respect me for a lifetime, I felt a discreet pang of guilt hit me. It was true that I loved him, that I wanted to work to rebuild our marriage, that I liked to see him make an effort. But it was also true that I hadn't even considered moving my knee away from Rodrigo's. That night, in James's arms, I promised myself that I would distance myself from Rodrigo, that I would dedicate myself completely to my marriage. I had given James and us a second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. But even with all my determination, I couldn't avoid the shiver that ran down my spine when, the next morning, I received a message from Rodrigo.
Laura, we need to talk. I have something important to tell you. Come to my office after class.
With my heart racing and my mind in turmoil, I headed to Rodrigo's office after class. I knew I was entering dangerous territory, but the curiosity and attraction I felt for him were stronger than my common sense. As I entered the room, I found Rodrigo sitting at his desk, his eyes fixed on me. The silence was deafening, the tension palpable. I closed the door behind me and took a few hesitant steps in his direction. Rodrigo stood up, walking around the desk until he was just a few centimeters away from me. His gaze was intense, his breathing calm. I felt my body react to his proximity, my skin tingling with anticipation. Without saying a word, Rodrigo leaned against the desk. Still in silence, his expression serious, he stretched out an arm and touched my hip, gently pulling me towards him. I had no strength. I was surrendered. I felt soft, fragile, unable to react. My breathing became uncontrolled. I hadn't felt something like this since I met, well, James. I closed my eyes, giving in to that electrifying sensation. When I opened them again, Rodrigo was even closer, his lips mere centimeters from mine. And then, in a precise movement, he kissed me. I was out of my mind. I couldn't think. The kiss was intense, urgent, charged with all the tension and desire we had repressed for so long. Rodrigo's hands explored my body, pulling me closer, while I lost myself in that moment of forbidden passion. His mouth was ridiculously soft and warm. His breath had a good smell. His touch slid firmly over my back, waist, neck. But as quickly as it began, the kiss ended. I pulled away, panting, the reality of what I had done hitting me like a punch to the stomach. I had betrayed James, broken my promise to be faithful to each other. How could I let this happen? Rodrigo, noticing my anguish, tried to approach again, but I stopped him with a gesture. I shook my head, tears of guilt and confusion filling my eyes. This was a mistake, Rodrigo. I can't do this. I can't betray James like this. I need to go, I said. And with that, I turned and ran out of the room, leaving a stunned Rodrigo behind. I ran through the university corridors, in shock. When I got home, I found James sitting on the couch, watching a soccer game. He smiled when he saw me, but his smile quickly turned into a look of concern as he noticed my state.
Laura, what happened? Are you okay?
At that moment, I looked at him and felt a mix of emotions. A kind of tenderness for James, which mingled with the bewilderment at the strength of my connection with Rodrigo and the flows of everything that had just happened that still ran through my body. In the days that followed, I tried to focus on my marriage, dedicating myself to James and our plans for the future. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get Rodrigo out of my head. The kiss we had shared had awakened in me an overwhelming desire, a passion I had never experienced before. I knew I should feel guilty for betraying James, for putting our marriage at risk. But to my surprise, the guilt I felt was minimal, almost insignificant compared to the intensity of my desire for Rodrigo. It was as if, by kissing him, I had discovered a part of myself that had been dormant for a long time. In class, I found myself watching Rodrigo, admiring his confident posture, his charming smile. Every time our eyes met, I felt a wave of heat run through my body, an almost uncontrollable urge to touch him again. I knew I was playing with fire, that I should walk away from Rodrigo before it was too late. But with each passing day, I felt my resistance weaken, my desire grow. One night, after a particularly heated discussion with James about our plans for the future, I felt suffocated, desperate for an escape. Without thinking twice, I grabbed my phone and sent a message to Rodrigo. I need to see you, now. My heart was racing as I drove to the address Rodrigo had sent me. It was a small apartment in the city center, discreet and away from prying eyes. When Rodrigo opened the door, I didn't hesitate. I threw myself into his arms, kissing him with all the passion and desire I had repressed for so long. He responded with equal intensity, his hands exploring my body, undressing me with urgency. We made love with overwhelming passion, surrendering ourselves completely to each other. Every touch, every kiss, every movement was an affirmation of the desire that consumed us. In Rodrigo's arms, I felt alive, complete, like I had never felt before. Afterwards, lying in his arms, I felt a pang of guilt hit me. I had betrayed James again, broken my vows of fidelity. But at the same time, I couldn't regret what I had done. The desire I felt for Rodrigo was too strong to ignore, too powerful to contain. I knew I was entering dangerous territory, that my relationship with Rodrigo could destroy my marriage and my life as I knew it. But at that moment, in the arms of the man who had awakened my passion, nothing else mattered. I was willing to risk everything for that overwhelming feeling, for that uncontrollable desire. I woke up to the soft sound of the alarm clock. Beside me, James was still sleeping peacefully. I got up carefully so as not to disturb him and walked to the window, watching the first rays of sunlight paint the sky in shades of pink and orange. It was a new day, another opportunity to balance the two worlds I was living in. Since I started my affair with Rodrigo, my life had become a constant navigation between my marriage and this new passion. James, still seeking my complete forgiveness after his betrayal, strived to be the perfect husband. He surprised me with romantic gestures, like breakfast in bed and passionate notes hidden in my purse. His displays of affection were touching and made me question whether I was making the right decision by maintaining my involvement with Rodrigo. However, each encounter with Rodrigo made me feel alive in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. Our stimulating conversations and the intellectual connection we shared captivated me. By his side, I felt valued, intelligent, and capable of conquering the world. It was as if a dormant part of me had awakened, yearning for more of this overwhelming emotion. I found myself torn between two men, two distinct relationships that fulfilled different aspects of my life. With James, I had stability, comfort, and a shared history, even though the trusting problem was still very much alive. With Rodrigo, I had passion, novelty, and a sense of freedom. Rodrigo told me in no uncertain terms that he wanted to be with me, that he wanted me by his side. I didn't expect this, but suddenly I found myself attracted like a magnet to this idea. I also wanted to spend more time with him, and not in secret. That had gotten out of control, and I didn't know what was what anymore. What I did know was that I wasn't getting revenge on James. It wasn't about that. I had been overtaken by this inexplicable attraction to Rodrigo, but I was certain that I wouldn't have acted on it if James hadn't done what he did, betrayed me before with Alice. Both offered me something I desired, and letting go of either seemed like an impossible task. However, as the weeks passed, the weight of maintaining these two worlds began to consume me. The guilt of betraying my marriage vows and the anguish of hiding such a significant part of my life from James started to affect my emotional well-being. I found myself distracted, unable to be fully present in either relationship. My mind was constantly divided, questioning my choices and longing for a resolution that seemed out of reach. Looking out at the horizon, I knew I couldn't continue in this state of uncertainty forever. Something would have to change, but I wasn't ready to make a definitive decision yet. For now, I would continue to balance on the tightrope between my marriage and my affair, seeking the courage to face the consequences of my choices. With a sigh, I stepped away from the window and began to prepare for another day of careful navigation between my two worlds. I knew I couldn't sustain this juggling act forever, but for now it was the only way I knew how to deal with the complexity of my feelings and desires. The weeks passed, and the anguish I felt from living a double life only grew. Every moment I spent with James or Rodrigo was accompanied by an increasing sense of guilt and inner conflict. I felt torn, unable to reconcile my contradictory feelings and desires. As the master's program vacation approached, I realized I had reached a critical point. I could no longer continue in this state of constant uncertainty and self-deprecation. I needed time for myself, away from the expectations and demands of James and Rodrigo, to sort out my thoughts and emotions. I made the difficult decision to communicate my need for space to both men. I sat down with James first, explaining that I needed time alone to reflect on our relationship and myself. He was visibly worried and insecure, fearing that this time could mean the definitive end of our marriage. I tried to reassure him, saying that this personal journey was necessary for me to be a better partner to him. But deep down, I knew I couldn't promise anything. When I met with Rodrigo, his reaction was surprisingly understanding. He listened attentively as I shared my inner struggles and my need to temporarily distance myself. Rodrigo showed support, recognizing the importance of this quest for clarity. He encouraged me to follow my heart and do what was best for me, even if it meant being without me for a while. With a heavy heart but determined to find the answers I so desperately sought, I began planning my solo trip to Italy. I chose Italy for its rich history, inspiring art, and vibrant culture. I hoped that by immersing myself in a completely new environment, I could gain a different perspective on my life and choices. As I packed my bags, I felt a mix of emotions: fear of the unknown, anxiety about what the future held, and a twinge of excitement at the possibility of rediscovering myself. I knew this journey wouldn't be easy, but I also had the conviction that it was a necessary step to find the inner peace I longed for. I said goodbye to James and Rodrigo, promising myself that I would use this time to deeply reflect on what I truly wanted out of life. I boarded the plane to Italy with a heart full of hope, knowing that regardless of the outcome, this trip would transform me in ways I couldn't yet imagine. As the plane took off, I looked out the window and contemplated the endless horizon. I was ready to embrace the unknown and face my inner demons. I knew the path ahead would be challenging, but I also had faith that at the end of this journey, I would emerge stronger, wiser, and more connected to myself than ever before. As I landed in Italy, I felt a wave of emotions wash over me. The anxiety and uncertainty that had accompanied me during the trip gave way to a sense of freedom and possibility. Away from the pressures and expectations of my daily life, I finally had the opportunity to reconnect with myself and explore my own desires and aspirations. In the first few days, I allowed myself to wander through the historic streets of Rome, admiring the grandeur of ancient monuments and the timeless beauty of the architecture. I visited museums that housed masterpieces by renowned artists, each brushstroke and sculpture evoking deep emotions within me. Standing before these works of art, I began to reflect on my own life, questioning the choices I had made and the paths I had yet to take. As I savored the local cuisine in cozy restaurants, I discovered a new appreciation for the simple pleasures of life. Each bite was a celebration of authentic flavors and the joy of being present in the moment. On these occasions, I realized that I had spent too much time worrying about the expectations of others, forgetting to nurture my own happiness. Walking through breathtaking landscapes, from the hills of Tuscany to the beaches of the Mediterranean, I found an inner peace that had long eluded me. The natural beauty around me served as a reminder of the vastness of the world and the insignificance of my daily concerns. In these moments of introspection, I began to question whether my feelings for James and Rodrigo were truly love or merely a search for validation and escapism. Here, surrounded by this stunning beauty, I feel as if I can breathe again. Each step I take in these enchanting lands takes me further away from the doubts and confusion that have consumed my mind and heart. Is what I feel for James and Rodrigo really love? Or have I been clinging to them as a way to fill a void within myself? Looking out at the endless horizon, I realize that perhaps I have placed too much responsibility on the shoulders of these men. I have expected them to complete me, to make me feel whole and valued. But the truth is that this fulfillment can only come from within. I need to learn to love myself first, to accept myself with all my flaws and qualities. Maybe this journey isn't just about choosing between James and Rodrigo, but about choosing myself, choosing my own happiness, my own dreams. I know I still have a long way to go, but here, in this moment, I feel a spark of hope ignite in my chest. The hope that by truly finding myself, I can also find true love, whether it be with James, Rodrigo, or myself. As the trip came to an end, a clarity began to form in my mind. I realized that regardless of who I chose to be with, I first needed to learn to love and value myself. I had spent so much time seeking happiness in others that I had forgotten to cultivate it within myself. With a lighter heart and a clearer mind, I landed back in my hometown. I knew I still had difficult decisions to make and honest conversations to have with James and Rodrigo, but now I had a new understanding of myself and what truly mattered in life. I left the airport feeling a gentle breeze on my face, and at last, genuinely smiling. Regardless of the path I chose to follow, I knew that this journey of self-discovery had transformed me in profound ways. With determined steps, I headed towards my future, ready to embrace the possibilities and face the challenges that lay ahead. The final choice was yet to be made, but I knew that regardless of the outcome, I had found something invaluable: myself.
Hey there, Unraveling Ties family. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. I hope it touched your heart, made you think, or even inspired you in some way. We would love to hear your thoughts and feelings about this story. Don't be shy. Leave a comment below and share your perspective with our community. Your voice matters to us. If you enjoyed today's story and want to be a part of our journey as we unravel the complexities of human relationships, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss a new story. We're always eager to explore new angles and dive into the themes that resonate with you the most. So tell us, what kind of stories would you like to see in upcoming episodes? Your input helps us create content that you'll love. And hey, if today's story reminded you of a personal experience or a tale you'd like to share, we're all ears. Feel free to share your own stories in the comments. Who knows, your story might even inspire a future Unraveling Ties episode. Once again, thank you for being a part of the Unraveling Ties family. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Until next time, keep embracing the ties that bind us and never stop exploring the depths of the human heart. See you in the next video.